So, Russia, what kind of associations we have when we say that word? Not very positive. The majority of those, except for a ballet and probably culture, are not something we're positive about. If you're going back to the Soviet Union, again, except for a ballet and a culture, what did we have? Well, we did have gender equality. Soviet Union was the country to introduce the most radical concept of gender equality. And Soviet radical project was often criticized by what was called bourgeoisie states at the time. And you can see the 8th of March plaque that portrays the achievements of women, that's late 60s, achievements of Soviet women, to show the achievements also of the gender equality project. What happened that when Soviet Union dissolved in 1991, and Russia was in quite a difficult economic situation, and then it went through a very painful modernization, economic crisis hit, and traditional values appeared exactly around the same dates as official concept to announced by Putin is the fundamental concept for Russia's development. Now, Russia has a traditional concept and traditional values, and it's still criticized for that, as it was for gender equality in the Soviet time. So what's wrong with it? Well, the problem was that, of course, gender equality wasn't about sameness. That is the plaque from the satirical journal Crocodile, it was called, it's 69. And you can see that they're already criticizing the policy of sameness, you know, in a sense that compares the two, they're exactly from the same year. So the women should be women, men should be men, but the gender equality they were thinking about was mostly about women achieving something in a male sphere. But the question is how this came to this. Anti-gender movement is very prominent in the past 10 years. This is a protest against what is called gender ideology. And gender ideology is understood as something in which you can choose a gender or gender as a choice. And it's always confused with sexual orientation. And the majority of people who participate in these protests, and that's the quote from the Bible, they're sort of thinking about gender as about sex or as about something that is focused on sex, which don't ask me how that came into existence, but it's quite spread in Eastern Europe as well as in Russia. And the next picture, I always ask, you know, women who grew up in Soviet times, I did too, how did you come to this? It reads, gender plus gay means genocide. You know, I still can't understand, or I can understand, and I offer my understanding, how radical gender equality project produced a whole generation of women who are now willingly participating in anti-gender movement. Now, what is anti-gender movement? Of course, not all women like that. So we have the other group of women who, of course, try to reinforce the human rights agenda and equality and emancipation and gender equality. So it's 8th of March protest in Yekaterinburg, that's in the middle of Russia. I look at these changes as the response of the area, Eastern Europe and Russia, to new liberalism, very painful transformations and very painful resistance to what new liberal economies brought into the region. It has also coincided with, not coincided, the direct result to austerity. And if you look at the European Public Service Union, that's the definition of austerity. The austerity hit public sphere and women much worse than it actually hit men. Religion played an important role because they jumped on the bandwagon of traditional ideology policies, and a traditional values policy is a very interesting policy. That's a policy that shifts responsibility from the social obligations of a state onto a family. Who is going to take care of your elderly parents? Women. Who's going to take care of your husbands? Women. Who's going to take care of children? Women. And this is all unpaid work because she's supposed to do so. And then the state might not be taking or paying or using the benefits for that. And what's more important, The state is still willing to help single women, but we don't want single women, so we push women into heterosexual marriage, because, I mean, we can't imagine two women in the same union, because they're both women, right? And so that hierarchical union should produce the contained unit, quite neoliberal, but still saving the state and saving the spending on social sphere. There's also partially resistance to change. Caroline mentioned a lot of these people value stability and value something, what they call stability at least, and any change is bad because of the painful 90s, and conservative and populist politics and politicians use their ideologies to their advantage, both as a colonial resistance and both as fight, actually, against neoliberalism, but also as against the outer threat. So, human rights of women are expensive. An anti-gender movement is actually a response to that, the results of austerity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marianna. Fascinating stuff again. You finished with the powerful phrase, women's rights are expensive. So walk us through again the facts of how this anti-gender movement, traditional values and austerity are connected. Is it a plan from the government to save money?
Yes, of course it is. You know, no, I don't believe in conspiracy. I mean, I do believe in conspiracies. Okay, I do believe in conspiracies. But anyway, human rights of women are what we call the group rights, and it's also second generation of rights. Socioeconomic rights are important for women. And these are the rights that what we call the positive promotive rights. The positive rights, when you have to pay to promote a lot, and social economic rights are those rights you have to pay for. Now, the first generation of rights, right to freedom, to life, etc., etc., they're not that expensive, they're negative rights. You announce, we protect them, so you don't need an additional budget to that. Once you actually have the whole social spending, you need a budget. So in the 60s, when women's rights became the part of the United Nations agenda and also the state's agenda, of course, you know, the states committed to promote and protect those. And the Soviet Union did as well. You know, one of the first countries to ratify CEDAW Convention, that's Convention on the Elimination of All Discrimination Against Women. And after the Soviet Union collapsed, there's no money, but we're still committed. Article 7 of the Russian Constitution says Russia is a social security state, so it still has no obligations. And you can't really, with that population, you can't really dump your social responsibilities. You have to be very inventive as to how you actually shift responsibility. And traditional values is a very creative and inventive concept. And also it works for some part of the aging population that is also the population that elect people, mostly elect Putin, and elect other deputies who are also of this sort of later, older age than the general population. But they're not that older than me, but, you know, I try not to think about it. So in a way, it is still a very expensive endeavor. And so when austerity hit, it became clear that something needs to be done. And one of the best examples is a pension reform Russia survived recently, which is again very painful for those people who work their whole life. I'm not getting any pension, for example, as a result of this reform. Again, it's a third in my time, you know, so it's again.
Sounds very interesting. You are a lawyer as well as a researcher, and I'd really like to hear a bit about your own work on the subject, sort of how you came into this and what have you been doing exactly to investigate this?
Right, I am a human rights lawyer, so I've been working for a long time and practicing for a long time defending human rights of women. I'm specializing in violence against women, so I've been working through the cases of domestic violence, which is again a very complicated situation in Russia. And for me, it was always very important to have an academic research put in my practice. Otherwise, you're not a good lawyer, probably. So if you don't have a bigger picture and also a concept of what it is to actually deal with human rights of women. And so through my career, I always try to apply, I'm a feminist, so feminist theoretical frameworks to what I do.
That's super inspiring. Tell us a bit about what's happening next in your work. I know you have something exciting coming up in these themes and in your work pretty soon.
Okay, we are now, our project is called Development of Russian Law at the Faculty of Law, and a colleague of mine, Alexander Konnikov, is going to be next talking about it. What we do, we queer Russian law a little bit. We also focus on gender and gender in legal tradition and gender in legal identity in a way. So if you're interested, you can follow us on Development of Russian Law blog we're doing. So we have also Twitter and we have a Facebook page. And if you're interested in any of these issues, Eurasia related or even not related to Eurasia, please come and talk to us. And we're going to stay here after the pub quiz, or during the pub quiz and after that. And we'll be happy to discuss these things.
Excellent. Such a good talk, so maybe questions afterwards. But let's give a huge round of applause to Marianna Muravyeva.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
Thank you.